Recently, the Muslim advocacy group DOAM highlighted one on-air outburst by GB News presenter Patrick Christys. Let's have a look.
You know, the fact that specifically around Eid as well, I'll come to you first on this, Emma, that there's testimony that basically some Pakistani men in Britain celebrated Eid by inviting their dads, cousins, brothers, etc. round so that they could abuse young working-class white girls.
Yeah, I mean, years ago I did an interview with a woman who was a grooming gang survivor. She remained anonymous, but she spoke about the religious motivations behind what her attackers were doing to her, the sorts of names that they would call her. I kind of really want to say them repeat them on television. But the motivation was clearly religious and clearly racist against her because she was a young white woman. In her case, she actually wasn't from a sort of vulnerable background. She was a fairly middle class background. And the evidence seems to be overwhelming when you hear these stories, that there is a religious motivation there. And it's not just that the authorities didn't want to act because they were afraid of being accused of racism. I think in some cases they were quite clearly afraid of being called Islamophobic. And the idea that you have to refer to them even as Asian grooming gangs, so it's not Japanese people that are predominantly doing this. So even in the way that we've been repeatedly told, oh, we're not allowed to even call them Asian grooming gang, but even that isn't quite accurate, is it?
Yeah.
So I think, good on Rupert Lowe for actually taking the initiative and doing this, because I think it's an absolute disgrace that the government haven't stepped up to the plate and done this properly.
Anyone has ever said good on Rupert Lowe. Odd. But they're saying, in the UK, evidence is mounting that suggests Muslims spend Eid by inviting their families round to rape little white girls. Insane. Curtis Daly asks a very important question in response to this. Headline you wouldn't hear in the media, as it would rightfully be disgraceful. There's a mountain of evidence that suggests Jews spend Yom Kippur by inviting their families round to rape little white girls. He's right. You would never hear something like that, and we shouldn't ever hear anything like that. We should never hear or listen to anything of the sort because it's vile, it's fabricated, it's anti-Semitic. Now, compared to how Muslims, especially Pakistani Muslims in the UK, are often treated in some parts of the media, particularly when it comes to stories about grooming, suddenly the standards shift, broad racialized narratives are allowed to fester. Politicians and commentators speak in generalities about Muslim grooming gangs, even though the Home Office's own data has repeatedly shown no single ethnic group is disproportionately responsible for child sexual exploitation. And the answer is simple. Some outlets and politicians are more than willing to trade in Islamophobia because it's been normalised. They know anti-Semitism would cost them their jobs or reputations, but Islamophobia gets them airtime and attention. Do you remember this video?
I am a victim of grooming. I was groomed when I was 11 years old, and I am disgusted with all of you here. I'm disgusted with all of you because it was not an immigrant, it was multiple.
That was at the Protect the Women rally in Hull on the 28th of September last year, 2025. A young survivor of child sexual abuse was forcibly removed from the stage after revealing her abuses were white, not immigrants. The crowd's reaction laid bare the racist agenda that's at hand. Its only concern was blaming Muslims or foreigners. And this proves one thing to me, that the same group of people who organise rallies like that or sit on panels on GB News and praise Rupert Lowe for pointing the finger at Pakistani Muslims care more about pushing an anti-immigrant narrative than about victims' actual stories. Now, GB News are notorious for this. Anyone remember this guy? This is John Rubens, jailed for 23 years, a devout Christian and summer camp leader, drugged sweets and sexually abused vulnerable boys for years. Reuben used the cloak of Christianity to gain trust. But did GB News blast this story and create panels for it? No. The only thing they posted was a 16-second YouTube short.
A summer camp leader has pleaded guilty to drugging and sexually assaulting 2 boys. John Reuben was arrested after 8 children and 1 adult fell ill at Slathern Lodge in July. The court heard how the 76-year-old laced sweets with tranquilizing drugs and attacked 2 children after asking youngsters to play a sweet game.
Rough. 16 seconds. 16 seconds. What about this one? Former Tory councillor admits drugging and raping wife over 14-year period. Philip Young, who served on Swindon Borough Council, pleads guilty to offences against ex-spouse Joanne Young. And it wasn't just Young standing in court, by the way. There were 5 other men who appeared alongside him in connection with alleged offences against Joanne Young. A quick segment here in a YouTube short uploaded, and guess what? No mention of their race or religion. Seems very fitting, right? And GB News don't do it because they're too and GB News don't do it because they're too busy doing shit like this. Talking about Eid rapes, Rupert Lowe 600k grooming gang inquiry here. Shock claims of quote-unquote Eid rapes and police cover-ups. Can we circle back to that woman who was sitting on that panel on GB News when she said that Rupert Lowe was doing great work, that Rupert Lowe's doing a good job? The same Rupert Lowe that struggles to get 2 sentences out without foaming at the mouth to bring it back to migrants. I'm sorry. I completely forgot this man was our saviour and our protection, the voice for women and girls in this country, especially when he says things like this.
Why are you doing this? Why are you just trying to talk about Pakistani grooming gangs when there are 4 times, 8 times and 10 times as many white grooming gang suspects?
Do you not think, Emily, there's an issue with Pakistani Muslims raping working class white underage girls? Do you not think there's an issue there?
I think
there is an
appalling issue with grooming
are you telling
when it hits any community and any age. We only ever hear you talk about Pakistani perpetrators.
Are you telling me there's no issue?
I'm telling you that you are focusing on Pakistani grooming gangs because probably you're racist.
Oh, he's racist. You heard it here first. Does he ever listen to women like this, though? That's what I want to know.
I was a teenager, when I was like 15, grown men would regularly objectify me. In fact, my friends and I would get picked up from school at the age of 15 by men in cars that were in their early 20s and driven around and taken home and taken places. And at the weekends there would be parties where they would buy alcohol and we would be given alcohol that they had bought for us. And we were groomed by these men. And they were all white British men. And I think this happened up and down the country. This is not exclusive to me and my friends. This was a normal thing that happened in the 90s. I'm sure it happened in the 2000s. It probably still happens to this day. But these are the types of grooming gangs that really are hidden, that really don't get talked about. It's so normalised for teenage girls to be objectified by men in their early 20s because they're still sort of kids themselves in a way. They're only just out of their teens. But it's 100% grooming. We were 100% victims of grooming.
You really have to ask yourself, do you really think someone like Lowe cares? Like, does he actually care about us? Does he care about women and girls? Does he care about protecting women and girls in this country? So no, I'm going to leave that to you to decide. Whilst you've got people, you should have seen the comments under, do they call it comments or tweets? Tweets under Curtis's tweet, I don't know, saying that he doesn't care about abuse towards children and girls and that he was sympathising with paedophiles. But I'm really confused as to how child protection has morphed into a platform for propaganda. I'm so pissed off about it. When I was writing the story yesterday, found myself getting irate. This conversation has been hijacked for far too long by bad faith actors weaponizing our trauma for racist ends. This obsessive and sickening focus on immigration and race in the discussion of sexual exploitation is not about protecting women and girls. It's about using our pain as a political bludgeon. It is a cynical, dehumanizing agenda that exploits survivors whilst targeting communities of colour, particularly in this case, Pakistani Muslim men, to uphold this narrative of racial superiority and white innocence. And you can trace us back with colonial lies. They've done it for years and years, and it fucking stinks. And I really need people to understand that the problem here is men. It's white men, black men, brown men, Muslim men, Christian men, atheist men, the billionaire class and the elite men. Are we forgetting that the Epstein files have literally just dropped? It's a systemic problem. But I don't see the rage, this tabloid frenzy, this GB News moral panic when white men abuse children, when it's the church or the family courts or the BBC grooming by online predators or high profile celebrities. Again, lest we forget, the Epstein files dropped and there was a lot in there. Andrew's still out here walking, Mandelson still out here walking, and I see no fucking outrage. And I'm not trying to make it this black versus white thing, black versus white brown thing. Like, it's not that. It's just a men issue. I don't know. I don't see the panels wringing their hands about the abusive culture that's normalized by some men when it comes to harming women. They're nowhere, because it was never about abuse in the first place. It was never about justice. It's always been about scapegoating. And this abuse is so widespread. It's rooted in patriarchy and power and misogyny. And it's not skin color, and it's forms the fabrics of our systems, and we need to sort it out as much as possible. And just one final point, that this re-traumatizes survivors, the people actually impacted by all of these barbaric crimes and this racial scapegoating. It's using us, it's using our stories to justify immigration crackdowns and surveillance and deportations and this ridiculous racist fear mongering. So I'm tired of it. I'm tired of them pretending. If they want to actually protect us, then stop sitting on panels and being silent when the abuser is not brown or Muslim. Anyway, Ashok, hello. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on all of this? Despite the evidence that's been produced by the Home Office itself showing that individuals from no single background or religion are more likely than another to commit child sexual exploitation crimes, the narrative still persists about Muslim grooming gangs. Why has it become so normalized?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit on a lot of really, pointed to the fact that this is mobilized for a certain set of reasons, right? So it's like, why is it that this kind of rhetoric is mobilized? It starts really being mobilized post 9/11, post war on terror. Wait, let me get my full head in there. It's sort of like that. It's part and parcel of a geopolitical issue. There was also grooming gangs, if you want to call them, of various different stripes. There was white, obviously, there was South Asian, Muslim, there was, these exist in societies. And the way it was trying to be framed as they're targeting, working class white women, it's like working class women are targeted for all kinds of acts of violence. But to then try to racialize it, that they were specifically targeted because they were white, and that the state specifically ignored it because they were white and because these were brown Muslim men, I just think the preponderance of evidence overwhelming to show that this completely sort of fear mongering. And I want to take the point that you said earlier, which is that it's not the idea that I don't want to contest the point that people are making here based on the evidence, because what that does is, and I will in a second, it in some ways makes legitimate, in contesting it makes legitimate their points. But the Ministry of Justice data is from 2000 to 2020 to 2025 is very clear that 90% of defendants against child sexual assault were white and 87% were white English, when white English or white British population is actually just 74.4%. So what that shows is that actually the evidence shows that much higher proportions of white British people were defendants and found guilty and were charged with child sexual offenses. So it's not just, even pointing this out, they say, well, it's because that group of people is being targeted, this group of people, it's like a conspiracy theorist just constructing things. So everything justifies the original prejudice. And it's not just GB News. Last week on LBC, Rachel Johnson, Boris's sister, who has her own show, said that, she'd be worried if her daughter lived next to, quote, men from countries where girls are married at 9. So what they do is, this is a kind of liberal class, even though she's this liberal urban intelligentsia who, whether it's Tories or Labour, they kind of had the same kind of ideology, which is like, we're not going to come out and say it's a race thing. We're going to say it's a cultural thing, and we're going to say it's because they're from these countries. But obviously that's just racist, right? So it's like they don't even need any evidence for it. It's obviously preposterous. And also it's like, well, 10 years ago or even a few years ago, it was these group communities will not integrate. They're in their own communities. Now it's we don't want to live next to them. It's like, which one is it? Which one is it? Is it that we're dangerous and you don't want to live next to us? Or is it why aren't you living next to us and integrating? Because it's just moving the paradigm. And lastly, to your point that you said, it's just so shocking that this is still being discussed in the very week when we've had thousands of emails dropped that demonstrate that the most powerful men who happen to be white, again, I'm not trying to be a vulgar culturalist here. I don't think there's something specific about being white that makes you more, attuned to violence. But I think it's that you have here the most powerful white men in the world systematically targeting, and in some cases it's coming out potentially murdering girls. And the fascists just don't care. They haven't said a word. They haven't said a peep. And Tommy Robinson just today, I mean, we've had a flurry of tweets this whole day that have been breaking news, but he tweeted about it for the first time, and he said all he had to say for it is, well, I think Epstein was actually a Russian asset, which first of all is laughable because obviously he was a kind of mercenary, and if anything, he was an asset for Israel, but also, and clearly, Tommy Robinson is saying this because his handler from Israel sent him this, but it's just so obvious that this is a mechanism to maintain the existing power structure, divide the working class, blame migrants, and then maintain and insulate the power structure. And that's what you're seeing. None of these people, the same people that seem to care about working class white girls, all the people that were targeted were working class white girls, almost all of them. And they're not saying a peep. And so they've revealed themselves this week, but nobody's even talking about that.
Really great points about insulating like the power structures. That's exactly what it is. And I think that's something that can be traced back for so long. I think what tends to be forgotten here is that victims come from different creeds, different colors, different classes. But the focus here on white working class girls, I think, completely overlooks the fact that they are victims. Of course they're victims, but they are victims alongside many victims who are victimized by these horrendous perpetrators that come from different creeds. But you're so right, it's true. Like, which one is it? Like, do you want people to integrate, or do you not want to live next to them? And I think what I notice more, so Crowborough at the moment is seeing a lot of flag posting and stuff, and Crowborough's not too far from me. So when you're thinking about all of these people who are so angry by these people who are coming into their towns, I'm like, but your towns aren't even that diverse. Like you're scared of an unknown, of something that just hasn't even happened or touched your town. Try living in a city where you see much more diversity, and you might actually change your views on things and stop listening to GBBs.